The question isn't, can you be good without believing in God? The question is, can you be good without God?
Oh, William Lane Craig, it seems you got even the question wrong this time.
Oh, Paulogia, it seems you didn't even understand the question this time. Welcome everyone, this is Darwin to Jesus, and today I'm going over Paulogia's response to William Lane Craig's moral argument. I wanted to go over this video because I love the moral argument, and I know that a lot of Christians will see things like this video and feel intimidated, but really there's no need. I'm going to explain in simple English what is going on and why Paulogia doesn't know what he's talking about.
And here we go.
Here's the problem. If there is no God, what basis remains for objective good or bad, right or wrong?
If you'll indulge me,
No, I don't think I will.
I'm going to take this video a little bit out of order, so that we can examine some logic first and deal with some of the appeals to emotion a little later. Here's Craig's argument.
If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. But objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God exists.
As you can see, this argument hinges on the definition and existence of objective moral values, and, if they do, establishing a causal relationship between them and God.
Alright, so far I'd say we're off to a good start, but I just want to elaborate. In order for morality to exist in an objective way, God must exist. This is because if there is no God, there couldn't be real, objective moral values and duties. If there is no God, then how would we determine what was quote-unquote good? It would have to be determined subjectively by us, and this would be arbitrary and meaningless. When we talk about objective morality, we mean that there are real moral truths, like it is true that it is wrong to torture babies for fun.
What does it mean to have an objective moral standard?
Without some objective reference point, we have no way of saying that something is really up or down.
Let's take the problematic word objective out of that for a minute and repeat.
Wait a second. Notice how Paulogia just took the word objective out of the example? There's a reason he did that. He's about to change the point of the illustration. The entire point of the illustration here is that in order for astronauts to be right about if they are up or down, the reference point must be objective and fixed. Just like C.S. Lewis said, a man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. Now let's look at the illustration. If the reference is not objective, then 5 different astronauts could choose 5 different reference points, and they would all mean different things when they said, I am up or I am down. The point that Craig is making is that in order for an astronaut to be correct about if he is up or down, that astronaut's reference must be a true and objective, real reference. If the reference is arbitrarily chosen by the astronaut, then the astronaut would have no grounds to say he was right about his orientation when he disagreed with the other astronauts about if they were up or down. William Lane Craig is showing what is needed for objective moral values and duties to exist, and Paulogia has simply missed the point entirely and is making an argument for subjective morality. The point of premise 1 of Craig's argument is that God must exist if objective moral values and duties exist. Paulogia is not refuting premise 1. He is simply arguing that morality is subjective. This actually concedes the first premise because Paulogia is making a case that objective morality does not exist, which necessarily is what follows if there is no God. This is exactly what Craig's premise asserts. If there is no God, then objective moral values and duties could not exist. Paulogia is pretending to be refuting the first premise while in reality he's agreeing with it. In order to disprove premise 1, Paulogia would need to demonstrate that morality can be objective without God. He's not doing that. All he's doing is making a case for why morality is subjective. Let's continue.
Without a reference point, this astronaut in space can't tell what's up or down. Presumably, the astronaut in this scene will choose the Earth as his reference point, and presumably choose to think of north as up and south as down. Once he is chosen, he can use this reference point to objectively identify other objects as up or down in relation to the reference point. In relation to a north-oriented Earth, the circular object in this scene is objectively up. But note that the reference point itself was chosen entirely subjectively. The astronaut could have chosen the South Pole to be up, or chose the wheel thing for his point of reference, or the moon, or the sun, or anything really. The point is that Craig is mistaken. It is not the reference point that is objective, but rather the relationship between the object and the reference point that is objective. The wheel thing is objectively up when compared to the Earth reference that was chosen entirely subjectively. Make sense?
Just to cut in here, once again, all he's saying is that there is no objective reference point, therefore there is no objective reference point. He's not even conceding the possibility of an objective reference point existing. He is simply arguing that all reference points would necessarily be chosen arbitrarily. He's setting this up to make a subjective moral argument later on. None of this addresses Craig's argument, however, because Craig is saying that if morality is objective, then a real objective reference point must exist. Paul is not even addressing the point.
When we say an object is up, we are always actually meaning in reference to my perspective that object is up. But that level of specificity would be very cumbersome in casual conversation. And in day-to-day life, we have so few conversations where we don't have a common perspective on what is up, that we simply drop the in reference to my perspective part for convenience. Indeed, the concept of shared perspective is so intuitive to us that most people never really stop to think about it. Because everyone we meet has chosen to agree that the ground is down, it seems to us that the ground is objectively down in all circumstances. But it should be clear by now that there is no such thing as absolute down, no version of down that is down for all perspectives. A common reference point must be first arbitrarily agreed upon to even begin to talk about up or down. It is in trying to pretend objective morals and absolute morals are the same thing that Craig manages to deliberately confuse the whole issue.
So Craig hasn't confused anything. I don't believe this video has even mentioned the word absolute. Craig is simply arguing that if objective moral values exist, then God must exist. This has nothing to do with absolutes. Unless Paul means that God is absolutely good, then yes, that is the case. God would have to be absolutely good in order to be a true reference of goodness. Just as a line would have to be absolutely straight in order to be a perfect reference for straightness.
God's nature provides an objective reference point for moral values.
Setting aside for today the problem of how one could confidently describe God's nature before establishing that God exists, Craig is repeating his mistake. Just as the Earth in the previous space scene was not an objective reference point, but rather a subjectively selected reference point against which the astronaut could make objective comparisons, so too God, even if he exists and exhibits all the properties laid out here, would still be a subjectively selected reference point if one wanted to use him.
Alright, here once again, Paulogia is making an argument for subjective morality. He is arguing that an objective reference point does not exist. William Lane Craig is arguing that for objective morality to exist, an objective reference point must exist. The point William Lane Craig is making is not even being addressed or refuted once again. For example, imagine I said that in order for my car to turn on, there must be gas in the engine. Now imagine that my friend says to me, but there is no gas in your engine, and gas doesn't exist. That's not the point, is it? William Lane Craig is arguing that an objective reference point must exist for objective morality to exist. Paulogia is arguing that an objective reference point does not exist. This in no way refutes either of Craig's premises.
Even though there's a minimum possible temperature at which atoms completely stop moving, so-called absolute 0 degrees on the Kelvin scale, most people on Earth instead choose Celsius or Fahrenheit scales, where the meaning of 0 degrees are subjectively chosen to be something else.
It's the standard against which all actions and decisions are measured.
It's a standard against which actions and decisions could be measured. The nature of Satan, Charles Manson, or your friend's ever-cheerful mom could also be chosen as standards.
Did you hear that? Think for a second about what he's saying. Does anyone really believe that morality is subjective? If I decide that my reference point for morality is Charles Manson, and I go start torturing and murdering famous pregnant celebrities with my cult, I would be acting totally moral based on his view, would I not? Under his view, all people act moral, because all actions are based on their subjective reference. And so the only people who could be immoral are the people who somehow act against their own standards, which no one really does. So under this view, Ted Bundy did absolutely nothing wrong when he went and butchered over 30 young women. He simply chose a different standard than we do. This is why atheism is absurd, among other reasons. I'm going to address the rest of this in the next 2 videos, but that about wraps it up for this one. I really hope you learned something. If you did, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for your time, and God bless.